vast number, as I can judge from my very considerable fan mail, I should say that only a small proportion I possess, and even of those, not very many have really read the books with any attention.
The last episode begins with the three mysterious, gaunt and malevolent characters who have been tracking the Harfoots, approaching Gandalf, and seemingly worshipping him. They think he is Sauron, and when it transpires that he isn't, a battle ensues. The Harfoots decide to defend him, which is astonishing. They have shown consistently throughout the series that they abandon their own without a second thought, when they fear that stragglers will slow them down and expose them to danger. And yet here, when an outsider they have inexplicably aided has drawn the very threat they wish to steer well clear of, is where they choose to make a stand. But let us examine why these strangers are yet a further affront to established law. They are portrayed as mystics, with clear mastery of magic, and cultists of Sauron. The central figure, known as the Dweller, is purportedly from Rhûn. They are clothed in white, and seem almost elven. Yet even here there is mangling of what Tolkien wrote. It is clear that the material here has been outright ripped from what were the Black Númenóreans, albeit it is difficult to establish exactly what their origins are in the show itself. But let us look at the source material, both directly from Return of the King and the appendices which Rings of Power had access to. Starting with the Return of the King, in the chapter The Black Gate Opens, the rider was robed all in black, and black was his lofty helm. Yet this was no ring-wraith, but a living man. The lieutenant of the Tower of Barad-dûr he was, and his name is remembered in no tale, for he himself had forgotten it, and he said, "I am the mouth of Sauron." But it is told that he was a renegade, who came of the race of those that are named the Black Númenóreans, for they established their dwellings in Middle-earth during the years of Sauron's domination, and they worshipped him, being enamoured of evil knowledge. And he entered the service of the Dark Tower, when it first rose again, and because of his cunning he grew ever higher in the Lord's favour, and he learned great sorcery, and knew much of the mind of Sauron, and he was more cruel than any orc. The Black Númenóreans were clearly described by Tolkien. They were proud, powerful, but above all were conspicuous in their hatred of the faithful, prominent in their loyalty to Sauron. They were originally composed of those who were loyal to Tar and Calimon when the Schism of Númenor began. They were descendants of these original kingsmen, who had colonized various regions of Middle-earth, and when Sauron returned after the downfall of Númenor, they were quick to declare for him. Over time they had declined significantly. They had mingled with other races of man, where, though they were prominent, had eventually been absorbed into the cultures of Harad and Umbar, as per Faramir's description. The men of Númenor were settled far and wide on the shores and seaward regions of the great lands, but for the most part they fell into evils and follies. Many became enamoured of the darkness and the black arts. Some were given over wholly to idleness and ease, and some fought among themselves until they were conquered in their weakness by the wild men. So, exactly who and what are the showrunners trying to present here? Do they truly forego the very material they have the ability to delve into? It very much appears to be the case. The battle leaves Sadok dying, an embodiment of what is wrong with Rings of Power. Whilst I respect Lenny Henry as an actor and comedian, his insertion into an already poorly written facsimile of hobbits was clearly designed to subvert Tolkien's works and ridicule the fan base. Elsewhere, Elrond is speaking with Celebrimbor when Galadriel and Halbrand appear. At a certain point, Halbrand surveys Celebrimbor's smithy. Later on, the leaders of the elves are discussing crafting something powerful and new, and inexplicably Halbrand had suggested this to Celebrimbor. Gil-galad rejects this notion and tells Halbrand to leave. This shows, yet again, the writers of this farce have not even read the source material. When Sauron approached the elves, he had assumed a fair form, when he was still able to, under the guise of Anatar. Because he was one of the Maiar, and that they were able to perceive this, he was able to convince some of them that he was sent by the Valar. As in the Unfinished Tales, in Eregion, Sauron posed as an emissary of the Valar, sent by them to Middle-earth, thus anticipating the Astari, or ordered by them to remain there to give aid to the elves. He perceived at once that Galadriel would be his chief adversary and obstacle, and he endeavoured therefore to placate her, bearing her scorn with outward patience and courtesy. However, Gil-galad did not fall for his machinations, and kept not only his messengers out of Lindon, but even Sauron himself. Galadriel, too, saw through his disguise. Which begs the question, how are the showrunners not aware of any of this? How do they create a setting where Halbrand roams free in Eregion, where Gil-galad has allowed him to do so? And of course, the most glaring aspect of this all, Galadriel and Halbrand. The show tries to convince us that Galadriel has been on a millennia-long quest to avenge her sibling who was killed by Sauron. Just the one, mind, not the others who were also killed. Yet fails to recognize the most obvious signs of his presence. Bear in mind that Galadriel is regarded as amongst the wisest of elves. As in the Unfinished Tales, Galadriel was the greatest of the Noldor, except Fëanor maybe, though she was wiser than he, and her wisdom increased with the long years. So how does the show attempt to reconcile this? With clumsy, childish stupidity, bereft of all subtlety and respect for the source material. Galadriel bluntly confronts Halbrand, after having determined that no such King of the Southlands exists. This is after having scoured through the archives, even though she has been doing this for centuries prior, and had the epiphany over the symbol for Mordor. Halbrand responds that he is indeed Sauron, and then laughably tries to tempt her. Remember, Tolkien had already established that Galadriel could see through Sauron's deceptions. If his disguise has been revealed, why would he ludicrously attempt to trick the single wisest being in Middle-earth? Then we are back with the Harfoots, who seem to have fully adopted Gandalf into the tribe. The show even has to shoehorn lines from the movies, like this one.
It's that way.
He's remembered.
No, but the air doesn't smell so foul down here. If you dine in the Anok, always follow your nose.
Finally, the 3 rings are forged. Canonically, these were supposed to have been forged in secret, but it is anyone's guess as to whether the showrunners know this. Sauron, now revealed, walks up to Mordor, and is probably aware of their existence. A confused jumble of the source material, and a fitting metaphor for the season's end.